Hello! I just asked if you guys had Anaconda production questions for me that I could answer, that I could find the answers, and the responses I got went in a totally different direction than I expected, and I don't mean that in a bad way. So I'm going to go through and answer a bunch of them. Question 1. You ever thought of changing the animation a bit that's up to date for 2020? Actually, I already did. Since my ultimate goal is to run a reboot of Anaconda, I did give you a sample of what that would look like. Look up new Anaconda theme song, you can see it on my channel. So this is what my idea of a reboot would look like. One of the people working on it who did the new theme song actually worked on the original show. His name is Ed Chi. He's wonderful. He was a prop designer on the original show and he did the storyboards for the new theme song. What I wanted to do with the new animation is keep true to what Anaconda was, keep its unique spirit, but also update it in many ways. Give them skin tones, make the colors pop more, make the story flow a little bit more, update the characters' relationships, and you can see that all on my channel. So, I have done it, to answer your question. Any new characters for the show for new episodes? Yes, actually. I am writing episodes on my own time, and I'm not going to talk too much about that. But first and foremost, I do have a couple ideas for other characters, but mostly what I want to do is use the characters that the original show already gave us and flesh them out, especially the main cast. The main cast is more what I'm concerned about. Angela's relationships with her friends, and Nanette and her friends, and some of the weird characters around town would make for fun side characters. But the main cast is the most important to me, and who they are, how they relate to each other, what's their place in the story, or what are their problems, stuff like that. Who would rival up with Angela herself and her crazy imaginations? Well, her rival in the show is Nanette. That's the dynamic of the show, Angela and Nanette's rivalry. But in terms of, if you're asking me, is there somebody as imaginative as Angela? Well, the show is Anaconda, so she's really the one with the imagination. And I don't see any of the other characters thinking quite the way she does or being as imaginative as she is. That's her thing in this show. But the closest, I guess, would be her parents. Her dad is an inventor, her mom is an artist. She gets it from somewhere. Did you think of a new love interest for her? I don't see Angela Anaconda as the kind of character who'd be having a love interest. I can think maybe at most a kid crush, maybe on Raven, her babysitter, but I don't really see her with anybody in the show. I see her as the kind of character who wouldn't really be focused on that. I see that as more Gordy Reinhardt's thing. So I have not thought of a new love interest for Angela, and I don't think she needs one, personally. Is Angela herself, does she always see herself evil or an anti-hero around other, or still has heart, or people just don't see it in her point of view? Okay, I'm guessing you're asking me, does she always see herself as evil? She doesn't see herself as evil at all. She definitely feels bad if she does something wrong, but she doesn't see herself as a fundamentally evil person or an anti-hero. I think she sees herself as a kid who is sometimes treated very unfairly, and very much like a typical kid. I think she thinks herself as a very normal person. So, very much the every girl with an imagination who wants things to be fair. Okay, do you have or had any contact with any of the people behind the show? Voice actors, animators? Actually, yes, quite a bit of contact. I've interviewed quite a few people from Anaconda on my channel. I interviewed Ruby Smith-Moravitz, who voiced Nanette Manoir. I interviewed Ed Chi, who's a prop designer. We actually even did a few rewatch videos together. I interviewed the creator, Joanna Ferrone, who is an amazing person. Everybody who has worked on this show is amazing. And there are quite a few people I've talked to who haven't appeared on film with me. I've talked to quite a few of the background artists. I've talked to one person example, Zoe Zorek, she was an animator on the show. She's fantastic. And I am planning another interview with somebody you're not going to be thinking about, and somebody you wouldn't think of right away, but somebody who has a very, very cool behind-the-scenes look on Anaconda. Not Sue Rose, it's not Jasmine Ellis. Oh, by the way, I have actually talked to two of the face models before, and they told me that they were really only in the studio for one day. It was a very long day. They were taking pictures, all different angles, had to make all the sounds in the English language, but beyond that, weren't heavily involved with production. So the face models I talked to Kaylin Monroe, who was Gordy Reinhardt, and I've talked to Ruby Gillette, who was Nanette Memoir. I have not been able, sadly, to get in contact with Jasmine Ellis, who is Anaconda. I have also not been able to get in contact with Sue Rose, who voiced her and did a lot of artwork, so hope that answers your question. Let's see, how long did the average episode take to animate? I hope to find that out. How different were the storyboards from the final product? Again, a good question. I'm not entirely sure on that one. And I don't know if I'll be able to get an answer for that one, but I'd say best guess, I think when the story set the general idea, I feel like for this show, you know, things do change a lot during production, but I feel like when the story's set, because Core Digital Pictures, I've been told many, many times, was very, very well run. So I feel like storyboards wouldn't have changed so dramatically from when they were drawn until the final episode. But again, just speculation. Ta-da. If there's a difference in animation between the Kablam shorts to the actual show, like did they use different animation style for Kablam and change it when the series was picked up? If I had to guess, I mean, the Kablam shorts were a lot rougher. I have to imagine the process was somewhat similar, but obviously much more elaborate and more sophisticated in between the Kablam shorts and the formal series. I hope I don't come across as rude when I ask this. Would Anaconda appeal to entertainment of the young audience today? Yes, because Anaconda deals with themes that are always going to be relevant, such as dealing with bullying and using your imagination to solve your problems and having very creative solutions to your problems, and stuff that's always going to be relevant. Particularly what Anaconda does so differently that I don't see in any other kids show, even a lot of adult shows. The only adult show, well, granted, well, what I've seen, Anaconda's the only kids show I've seen that has ever done this, that has shown the importance of anger and using your imagination and having revenge fantasies, but ultimately using that to better your situation, to find creative solutions to your problems. I liked that because a lot of kids shows and after school specials very much demonize anger and treat it like a bad thing, but Anaconda treats it as a very normal thing. And that's what makes it still so different and so relevant. So I always loved it for that. But especially stuff like bullying and using your imagination and dealing with difficult people, Anaconda has stuff that's always going to be relevant, stuff that's never going to go away. So there is always going to be this lasting appeal with the idea and with some of these characters and with the stories. You can tell so many stories with this show. And that's what I hope to do, because it deserves it. Okay, two biggest interests are unique animation process, creative conception. I'd like to know more about the face models for the characters and their work on the show. It seems almost impossible to even find out the names for most characters. Yeah, it is actually hard. Even for some of the voice actors, I don't know who voiced who. And this one, it doesn't always tell you. How are the face models chosen? Actually, that's a legitimately interesting question. How were they chosen? Why were they cast specifically? How much were they actually involved in the process? I can safely say I do know that one. Face models were not extensively involved with the show's production. They were in the studio for one very long day, which is in the making of video, and it just mentioned that. It's a huge shame the original software put to use the faces doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, elastic reality. That was very, very interesting. Yeah. That would be really interesting how the face models were chosen. Yeah. I actually don't know. If I had to guess, probably whatever best fit the character. But what I really, really like about the design work in Anaconda specifically is that they don't pick these very Hollywood-looking kids. They picked kids who have more distinctive features. They picked kids who didn't look perfect, who had some character to their faces. Maybe not, cute kids, but not your classical good-looking models. And I like it for that. There's character to them. They look very much like real kids, and I like that they're both cute, but also awkward. Even for Nanette and January and Carlene, they've got a bit of that real life quality to them, especially in the faces. And yeah, I think of Anaconda the best way I've described it in the past is Peanuts meets South Park. So I like that. They have this real world quality to them. And Joanna Ferrone, the creator of the show, her intention was essentially to create a warped version of reality. That's what the goal was. That's some of the choices behind the art style to begin with. A very warped, distorted real life. Now this question, ever thought of making it darker to appeal to older demographics like Invader Zim? No, because it's better to be a first-rate Anaconda than a second-rate Invader Zim. And Invader Zim's a great show, but it's not Anaconda. Ultimately, Anaconda doesn't need to be needlessly dark. I think what I always liked about it, there is a lightness and a darkness to it. It's got silly fun, but it's also got hilarious, vengeful violence. I think it's more important for it to be honest and its own thing rather than dark and edgy. But it has its own weird brand of humor. So, no. I think it's important that Anaconda is true to itself and its identity, as opposed to trying to be something that it's not. And it's not Invader Zim. It's Anaconda. Do any guest stars voice in cameo characters? In the original show, again, I have such a hard time figuring out who voiced who. For face models, a lot of the background characters were crew members, and so guest stars, I don't think this show had them. Famous guest stars, I don't think so. The biggest name I can think of, Sue Rose, because she was the creator of Pepper Ann, and Kara Pifko, who voiced Josephine Praline, had some roles in Better Call Saul. She's a prolific actress. Everyone else couldn't tell you. I don't think this show, like I said, I don't think this show had a very famous guest stars in it. So, and if there were, I'm not as familiar with it because it's not always very clear who voiced who did what, especially with the way the credits are, the way they're set up, and how much information is out there. Oh, and if you could voice one character in Anaconda Reboot, who would it be? I don't want to be Angela, because she is me as a kid. Looks like me, thinks like me. That's the character I'd want to voice. Maybe I'm a fit for it. Again, we're not really that far along, so who's to say what's going to happen? Even ideas I tell you in this video, stuff I'd like to do, things may change when we actually get into production, so who's to say? But I really, really want to voice Angela. Ooh, this is an interesting question. How would you update the stereotypical characters like Johnny's dad, well, that's Uncle Nicky, or the Japanese librarian, Miss Yamagachi, in your version of the show? Keep them the same, change them completely, mix of both, or just leave them out of the show completely to avoid that question? That is a good question. Well, some of the characters, well, the Abadis, have some stereotypical qualities, but at the same time, they have characteristics beyond just Italian. Johnny, he's a happy-go-lucky guy. He's very nerdy. He likes Kung Fu Crab. He has some nerdy interests. He's not the sharpest tool. He's not a very bright guy. So I can describe him. He's not just this. I personally think keeping him Italian is fine. Uncle Nicky, maybe just tone down the voice a little bit, but ultimately he is a funny character. You know, the sleaze, the guy kind of successful with women, kind of not. He's someone he's a con artist, essentially. He's kind of like the Grunkle Stan of this show. So he pretty much could stay the same, maybe just some of the voice toned down just a bit, but keep him pretty much the same. Because again, Uncle Nicky's funny. And same with Nona. Nona's a sweetheart. And at least with where the Italian stereotypes were concerned, Joanna Ferrone is of Italian descent herself, so a lot of that came from just her family, her own heritage. And again, the Abadis have characteristics beyond that. Other Italians have told me, oh, they loved the stereotypes, at least for that one. As for Miss Yamagaki, that one, because especially nowadays, well, even throughout, because historically she is more aligned with a racial caricature. I have been told by people of Asian Canadian descent that they didn't find the character offensive, but of course that does not speak for everybody. That character is much more of a caricature than some of the others. But she doesn't have, and she was always on the kid's side. Her character she was just a very strict, very intimidating woman, but she was generally helping the kids out. She was on their side. I don't know, because she was so much more of a caricature, I feel like that would be a harder one to figure out. Personally, I'd probably just, because a lot of that character type, strict, intimidating woman who is not American or Canadian, I feel like a lot of that can be done with Nona, so I probably, unless I could figure out a way to make Miss Yamagaki an interesting character and downplay a lot of the racial insensitivities, because I feel like, and no matter what you do, I feel like there's going to be criticism no matter what you do. If you make her somebody who speaks with perfect English, people could say, oh, you're erasing her Asian heritage. How dare you whitewash this character? If you make her somebody who is, if you do give somebody who's has the accents, like, oh, you're just making fun of the accent. So that would be a much tougher one, in my opinion. With that particular character, because she wasn't really in it that much, I probably wouldn't have her in there unless we could figure out a way to work with the character, make her an interesting character, find a way for her to work within the show, just as an interesting character, and get rid of all the racial insensitivities. So, I hope that answers that. Just wondering, how many people does it take to make an episode? Could one person do it? I mean, theoretically, one person could, but probably, actually, not nearly as well as a full team. Especially if you're going to be doing voice acting and lighting and character animation versus background design. There's so many different parts to animation, and I would say one person could do it, but not as well as a full team. How many people does it take to make an episode? And I guess you can have a small team with that. That's a good question, because animation does vary. I've heard of productions that have maybe around 30 people working on it to make the show, but I've also heard of shows that have teams of hundreds making the show. So, good question, but a team. How many people to make it great? A bunch. This one. While developing the reboot idea, were you thinking of having them in middle school as tweens? No. I want them as kids. That's what we know. That's what we like. That's where the fun is. That's what we're familiar with, and you can still do a ton of stories with that. And, yeah, just had no intention of doing anything other than keeping them the same age. Will you be pitching to more places? I'm actually intrigued about seeing this potential reboot. Oh, thank you so much. I can't really pitch to a ton of places because of the studio that owns the rights. That's where I'm at my mercy. This is a little different. When I was pitching my original stuff, I was pitching to networks that I thought would be a good be a good fit. Can't talk. But anyways, with this show, because it is owned by a studio, I really have to get the rights. So I'm at their mercy. Distribution, there are a bunch of options, but the one studio owns the rights. I have to keep working with them and hopefully convince them. How did you get in contact with some of the crew? And that was all done online. People who had public profiles, I was able to reach out that way. And fortunately, they answered. I am very, very lucky that people said yes. So I essentially just sent very polite messages saying who I was, if I could ask some questions, and I got a response. So, online. What do you think was the most ambitious episode of the show? Ooh, that's a good question. I would say, artistically speaking, Jimmy Jamal's Super Beetle, because it has the revenge fantasy that looks like a comic book and it has these gorgeous, gorgeous 2D drawings. Plus, that episode has some cool fantasy sequences where Angela's falsely accused of stealing a chicken. It makes more sense in the episode. And you have these really cool film noir-esque angles. They have a lot of fun with the imagination and the fantasies. And they have such a different style for the actual revenge fantasy. Artistically, that one, Jimmy Jamal's Super Beetle. But in terms of story and themes, I would say the most ambitious one, probably any of the satire episodes, such as Bird Lady of Tapwater Springs, which goes into self-fulfilling prophecy and how people really, really want to believe in certain things. Thematically, I also really, really like the episode Touched by an Angela. Actually, you know what? The most ambitious episodes, probably the religious ones, because religion is such a big topic. Touched by an Angela, or Angel A, is... that one particularly goes into... well, that one resonates with me personally because it goes into how Angela's very much guilted and shamed into being angry at Nanette, but Nanette's never guilted and shamed the same way for being a jerk to begin with, which goes into a lot of the harshness of life. And this show has done quite a bit with religion that I'm very, very surprised they were able to do. Some of it was very informative, some of it very stereotypical, but the fact that they were able to include quite a bit of religion in there, for better and for worse, I'd say that's very ambitious. So any of the episodes that talk about religion, I'd say are the most ambitious story-wise. Touched by an Angela, Martyrdom of Saint Nanette, Bird Lady of Tapwater Springs, and maybe Yellow Book Road to some extent. Do you know what the core members of the animation staff went on to do? You can look that up on their profiles. You can look that up, IMDb, on social media. There's so many people who went on to do different things. Some people, like Zoe Zorick, went on to leave animation and focus on fine arts. Some people, like Ed Chi, are still working in animation and still doing very well. Ed actually was the storyboard supervisor on the show Last Kids on Earth, which was based on a graphic novel series. So I'd recommend, if there's an artist whose work you really like, if there are people from the show you can find in the credits, you can find through their websites or their social media profiles, definitely check out their work and support them because they deserve it. Do you know who the original face model for Anaconda on Kablam was? I don't. My understanding of the Kablam shorts is that stock photos were used, but again, I'm not entirely sure. That's my best guess, though. So, no, I don't know who the original face model for Kablam was. Do you think Anaconda could work as a video game as Telltale's Walking Dead or Back to the Future games? I don't know video games that well. I definitely could see Flash games. I'm sure video games could work with Anaconda. I mean, South Park did it. And pretty sure Steven Universe did that as well. But yeah, absolutely. Anaconda could work as a video game. And especially with the imagination element of it, there's a lot you could do with it. Angela dealing with her school life, or you could do Angela and her friends are playing a game, and they're using their imagination to do whatever. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with video games, so yeah, I think it could work. I think, well, Anaconda, there's such an interesting idea to it. It's so simple, it's easy to understand. There is so much that can be done with it, so yes. I would love the opportunity to do that, and I'd love the opportunity to do more with this show and to be able to expand on these characters and show people the good stuff that's in this show. Because there is so much. There is so much that this show has to offer. I think it should be given a chance. Not just I think, I know this show should be given a chance. There's good stuff in it. There was a lot of passion behind it then. There's a lot of passion behind it now. And it's really wonderful to see that there are so many people who love it just as much as I do. I hope that answers your questions. And feel free to ask more. I will see what I can do if I feel up to it. Great talking to you guys. See you later when you see me. Later.